Thank you everybody for joining us today. This is the Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Growth Hub's Do Digital webinar series. This is actually the second in the series. It's kindly being hosted by Charlie Euston-Brown, who is the founder of Rushkeep Solutions. So I'll let Charlie obviously explain more in depth about that. This is a webinar for digital transformation. So where to start with that? Obviously, given the current climate, with COVID and people working from home, there's been a lot of adjusting to working online. So it should be a very useful webinar for all of you today. Just a bit from me. I'm Melissa Soleimani. I'm a Growth Hub advisor for Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Growth Hub. And I'm joined today by my colleagues Pam Wallace and Becky Parker, who are both business advisors. Becky also deals with the Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Business Helpline. The number's just there on the screen. So the Growth Hub was founded by Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. It is to aid and support businesses in their growth, but I'll leave it to the guys to explain a little bit more about that. So that's everything from me, and I'll leave it to you, Charlie.
Good morning. Yes, good morning, everybody. So my name's Charlie Euston-Brown. I'm a founder of Rushkeep Solutions, and I spent many years in larger corporate businesses dealing with process improvement and digital transformation. So hopefully today we can cover some things. Now, what we're going to find is this is going to be quite high level, and because I don't know who's attending, so you can perhaps tell me in the chat box if there are any specific questions, then please do so. Okay. So just going to go to a presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, so today we're talking about digitally enabled transformation. Where to start, and this webinar is in conjunction with Stoke and Staffordshire Growth Hub. So just to introduce some high-level concepts, really, we're talking about breaking down your business, your organization, into three key areas, really. And people are perhaps the key, really, here, I think. If you're a small business, then implementation is going to be much easier of any of your changes. The larger the business, clearly, then the more organization is going to be needed, and the more complex your process will be, and potentially the more advanced technology that you've got in your business organization. But if you're a small business, then you may still be using quite advanced technologies to do what you need to do, but they may not be fully joined up. So taking the model slightly further, we can see that some of the relationships between people and technology, between people and process, and between technology and process. And we start to see this model building and the interrelationships that we have between the three key elements. So there are interfaces between each of these. And so when people and process work together, that's when you can scale and scale up, or scale out. Scaling up, making things bigger; scaling out, replicating or duplicating some of your processes. Automation. Again, there are a variety of tools available for automation. This could simply be email rules. It may even be Excel macros, spreadsheet macros, those kind of things. That's certainly at the beginning, and then the innovation piece, really. But to create proper innovation, there's time needed, maybe playing with the technologies, and often I refer to as having a lab environment. But the absolute fundamental to all of this digital transformation is going to be data. And quite often data is left towards the end, and it's absolutely key that we focus on data and data quality. Okay, so some other concepts really, the 4 I's of Industry 4.0. And, you know, I mentioned data before. Things are very much connected, interconnected, and systems creating lots more data. And so some of the key questions to ask is, how can you join the data sets together? What are the hooks that are needed for that data? And how can you make sure that the data quality is of sufficient standard that you can move things forward? Now, quite a lot of automation now. There is a very blurred line between automation and artificial intelligence. You know, take an email rows as an example. You can make decisions on your inboxes quite easily, and so it's not a big step really to then talk about full-blown artificial intelligence. So in terms of disruption, then that is at the heart. I mean, COVID has accelerated what was already coming, I think. And so we find ourselves being remote, we find ourselves not able to access information, and we find ourselves having to join things together, which were often easier in the office. So that disruption has happened, but it's not just about what's happening as part of the pandemic. I mean, you've got other you've got customers who want you to do things differently. You've got competitors that are doing things differently. So you see disruption often at the edges first, where you interface with external organizations. And because of the increase in data availability, there is that shift, so that these people at the edges, these organizations at the edges of your organization, understand more what's they have more information to be able to make decisions upon before you even speak to them. And so that customer experience that you need to give your that you need to provide from your organization becomes very important. So it's quite often interesting when you have a new starter into your organization. They often ask lots of questions, and that's having the beginner's mind, and that's really quite an important state of mind to have throughout this whole process of digitally enabled transformation. So organizations grow, okay, and when they start, often systems are put in place, they're point solutions. They may not really be there forever, or be meant to be there forever, but you find maybe 6, 12, 18 months later, those systems are set in place and they start to be unable to handle the volume of data, the volume of transactions, and so on. And spreadsheets are used for many things, and they're very useful. But certainly I find quite often that many businesses organizations run based on spreadsheet data. And one of the key areas of digitally enabled transformation is to look at those particular areas and see if they can be improved. So I mentioned earlier, I don't know your organizations, but consider this. The lower number of people makes life much easier. The amount of data depends on the complexity of data, depends on what that might be, and the variety of technologies that you have in your organization can make a big difference. And of course, your processes, are they already defined? Are they not? Are they documented? It will depend on your size of organization and how you look to do that. So is there a roadmap that you have for your organization? Do you know where you need to get to? Okay. I mean, you may not, but some of the key things that you need to accept, I guess, is if you don't know, well, look for the quick wins. Look for the things that are causing your organization pain. Look for areas where you see those inefficiencies. They will be quite stark, I would imagine. And I would think that if you get your colleagues together, you could very a list of 10 and start to tackle those as to what needs to be done. Okay. In the medium term, then maybe it's client behavior. Maybe you've got some progressive customers that want to move things forward, that are asking you for better services, asking you for improve things, and I guess probably they may be asking you for cost down. So that's a key thing to identify. And then longer term, new business models. With the amount of data that now exists, it's very, very possible for you to digitize not just your systems internally and improve from that, but also to look at your products. What data that sits around your products and your services can you also offer as in terms of insight? Okay, so we're going to just now move to a bit of a mind map. So I'm just going to adjust the screen. So just bear with me a second while I just move things around. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen. So I'll be moving this around a little bit, but so this is a mind mapping tool which I use with a lot of my clients, and I find it quite useful to be able to present things in some kind of order at least. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about people. The key area of an organization is its people. And you've got serious concerns if you don't have the right culture. Okay, and that's a digitally enabled culture. So discussing things digitally, discussing what needs to be done. A network culture. So being able to discuss things and look outside your business, outside your organization, and the key values. Okay, obviously skills. There's some organizations do this quite well. They have skills matrices that they're able to look at their technical abilities, their softer skills. So quite often that's already in place. But if you don't have a good handle on your skill levels, that's something to consider. And then quite often, probably the most important thing in terms of digital transformation, digitally enabled transformation, and making things stick is that organization and task management. And you may have heard some of these things, a RACI matrix. So I'll just bring this back up here. So RACI matrix is making those accountable, okay, responsible, consulted, and informed. It's a little bit of a misnomer because the accountable, the ones that are in red there, the accountable is the top level responsibility. So accountable for the changes, responsible for actually ensuring things are going, consulted, that's a two-way, and informed is a one-way. And then the work breakdown structure. Okay, so this simply is giving, I guess, reference numbers to each task. And so this works quite well with the RACI matrix. Okay. So moving across the process then. Okay, concept of an as-is process, to be. As-is is the existing current state, and to be is where we want to be moving to. Okay, so in terms of as-is, we can map the current process. List currently, we can often know what they are and experience them on a day-to-day basis. I mentioned earlier that's quite straightforward to do, I think. Non-added value activity, both internal and external. So an internal is what happens in the process while you're doing that. That might be, you can't move forward until something happens. But external could be something that you're waiting for outside of the process, and maybe you can do something about that, so that when you can get that happening much earlier. In terms of KPIs and measurement, KPI stands for key performance indicator. So what are they in your current organization? Do you have them at all? If not, then maybe you want to consider having something that you can measure the current business by, and that then in itself might drive a need to have data done in a better or simpler way. Silos being silos of both information and silos of people. In a larger organization, quite often people will go about their day-to-day activity and they won't be aware, I guess, of other things happening in the business or in the organization. So that's quite important to identify whether that kind of behavior and that kind of data is a key issue. Okay, in terms of then the 2B side of things, so a 2B process is your perceived view of what you think you want to happen. The area roadmap slide, what do you think you want to be doing? Okay, now to get there, you're either going to design something new or improve the existing process. There'll be a combination of both, I guess. What are those things, those critical success factors? Identify what they are earlier, and they'll probably come from the KPIs maybe. Talk to some of your key visionary customers. I guess they'll be friendly customers, but maybe you identify those clients that are pushing you or want to move forward, and they could then become actually partners or potential suppliers as well, as you start to build your new digital ecosystem, really. So back to another tool here. This comes from Six Sigma, and I'll just briefly go back to that. Okay. Yeah, so define, measure, analyze, control, improve, really. Yeah, I mean, it kind of is fairly obvious, really, but the whole point is that you don't do things just on the spur of a moment. With DMAIC, you can move pretty quickly, so you can turn the wheel quite fast, I think. And so it's really a question of you being methodical, but not, I guess, not subjecting yourself to analysis paralysis. So, be very focused on what you want to measure. And if you can measure it, you can improve it, is the point. Okay, that's the key thing. If you're not measuring something, then it's probably very difficult to improve it. So again, back to the KPIs, and you don't need to go mad. I mean, I don't think you need to have 10s and 20s of these. I mean, these are best done in numbers under 10, I think, so that you're quite clear what you're trying to measure. Okay. So yeah. So having looked internally pretty much at the processes, really, and some of your internal KPIs, then you might want to consider then talking about your customers specifically and your customer journey. So a customer journey really, again, is mapping out what that customer will do, client journey in your organization. Okay, what is their experience when they interact with you? Perhaps you can survey them, but in the first instance, perhaps you need to create that map and that plan of how they work with you and interact, so that you can see where the efficiencies are, the inefficiencies are, and that will point you towards where digitally enabled transformation can really help. So it does take some time, and it's best done in collaboration with some key customers. Okay, and then the value chain. So value chain analysis is then starting to look at some of these numbers. Okay, so having done some of this analysis, you're getting down now into actually deciding what you think you're going to actually deliver, really. So you can start to actually put some value, some numbers to some of this. Okay, pound notes particularly, or euros, or whichever currency you may be dealing in, and so ultimately you want to be delivering services and products to your customers, clients, with better margin. That's why we're all here. Now, that's not going to happen by accident. You're going to have to think that through and going to have to do some planning. The value chain analysis is a useful tool for that. Okay. So then implementing change. There's a lot of talk about agile. What is agility really? It's about not over planning. Okay, so planning the next stage in detail, but not planning the long-term future. So the roadmap slide, you could be 18 months away. Those are concepts and ideas. You don't need to be planning the detail for that, but you want to be planning the next probably 4 to 6 weeks in some detail to make sure these things actually happen. Launches, process changes. You don't want to break things, so you want to do some planning. As you look further out, you're going to look at resources, that kind of thing. Really, incremental and iterative. That's not thinking you have to do it all at once. You've got to get started and get started quickly, really, and then improve as you go. So agility is about being incremental and iterative. Iteration is very important. Getting something out that just about works is much better than in a few weeks or month, or is much better than waiting 6 to 12 months and finding out that your customer's gone somewhere else. Okay. Believer in pioneer use cases. So make your changes in specific cases. That might be a key customer, key client. That might be a key product. That might be a selection of criteria where you pick a certain number of customers, clients, products together to demonstrate that your changes will work. And what that means is you highlight them in the business, in the organization, and everybody then knows that these things are changing. So you put a spotlight on these pioneers. People will work harder and smarter, hopefully, and you should get some feedback. You need to put people around that, organizational structure around that. Okay, and that also links well into with a minimum viable product approach. So that's something that just about works. Okay, it works sufficiently well enough to demonstrate that you can you understand the process, the problems that may be there, and the next phase after that might be minimum marketable product, where you might sell that, but that's maybe for another day. So moving on to technology then. Inventory of current systems. So it's pretty important. You've probably seen already. I'm a big believer in understanding where you are, really. So a whole host of things to consider potentially. Where things are based on premise in the cloud. What suppliers do you have? What is the level of support you have? Will the systems be around in 12, 18 months? What's the change process in those systems? All those kind of things need to be understood, really, so that you better understand what you currently have. Okay. Digital core. Now, the digital core really is what's fundamental about the systems that you've got in your current organization. Okay. We all may well understand finance, of general ledger, sales ledger, and so on. In terms of marketing, you've got your website, but likely your CRM, and there'll be a whole host of things that sit in and around that, and those interfaces. In terms of the whole sales cycle, and all the other well-known processes in your business. What systems are they running in? So it's fairly straightforward to create a matrix like that to say, well, which process is running which system, and which is dependent on that. And what you can do is you can say, well, I'm 80% dependent for that process on this system, 20% on another, or 70, 15, 10. Whichever, however the split is. Okay. Understanding if these systems are commercial, off the shelf, or if you've had bespoke programming done. That's really pretty important. And then what integrations you've got. I think importantly, what was missed by a lot of people during, I think, because of the COVID lockdown and so on, is telephony. So a lot of people have got systems in place, but telephony, voice over IP, being able to make your calls from anywhere, really, where you have an internet connection, is perhaps something that's now come very much to the fore. I mentioned before email rules and management, and of course file storage. Understanding where that file storage is. Okay. So then just moving on to some more tools then, looking at the technology side of things. In terms of risk management, now this is going to depend very much on the organization, on what they, I guess what the appetite is for risk, really. So act on the probability of that risk to the organization and to what outcome that you're expecting. Okay, you've got a variety of ways to tackle that risk, to treat it, to tolerate it, terminate it, or transfer that risk. So the next on is the technology scenario planning. So these things will move. So what in your organization, what have you got, where is it, and where's it moving to? So these things will move around. And it's very good to version control this, I think, so that you've got some understanding of what's important, what technologies are important to you. And it doesn't have to be the generic technology. In something like this, you can just use what you call the systems, so that you understand them. It's something that you understand internally, really. And then placing those systems somewhere in a structured way. So transformative systems. What do you see them? Are they basic? Are they kind of fundamental, infrastructure-wise? Are they based on the number of transactions? So do they change? Okay. Is it about getting data back out again, or are they more focused on that longer term roadmap? Okay. And then in terms of any new systems, evaluation and selection, again, it's going to depend, I guess, on the value of those systems and how much effort you want. You're not going to spend weeks evaluating whether you're going to use a storage platform, I guess, but you might well do if it's a core system. So you might want to consider, asking for demonstrators or proof of concepts. They're slightly different. Demonstrators is kind of just seeing how the thing works, and proof of concepts kind of using your data. Okay, so I mentioned data and I mentioned how important it was. So in terms of data, I believe it's fundamental. We've covered people, process, and technology. Data is at the core of the organization. So in terms of not just your systems, but your data, where does it sit? Data quality is really, really important. We wouldn't question having a department looking after our product quality. If we're manufacturing or we're selling products, somebody's checking the quality of those products. Quite often in an organization, nobody's responsible for checking the data. Nobody is responsible for that, and that's a real concern for me, really. Availability, and indeed, can it be moved around? Can it be moved around? I mean, linking to the data quality actually is the ownership. One technique is to appoint data guardians in your organization, where they're responsible for certain data sets, really, and that's worked quite well to give people ownership of the data quality, really. In terms of data security, I think there was quite a lot of noise made about GDPR, but since COVID, it's become less talked about, perhaps. But it's still a very important data security. Data protection is very important, and understanding that is. And organizations have got the legal requirement and responsibility to make sure that they look after data, particularly personal data. And in any event, if you're not looking after your non-personal data, your transactional data, commercially, you're leaving yourself open to risk, really. And one of the big changes in the past, probably 24 months, I would say, is the big move to analytics, and analytics for the smaller business. The Microsoft platforms have really improved in terms of what can be done. Excel has moved on significantly, and there are now other tools and cloud-based tools now, Power BI, which are really quite phenomenal in terms of the kind of understanding that it can give you, the insight that it can give you, the support for making decisions, and even now with artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, to say, well, where do we think, what's the data saying, what do we think is going to happen next? I've just put budgets on here because nobody operates outside of a budget, but that's for a completely separate conversation, really. But budgets are very important to keep an eye on. So just moving on to products, and products really is perhaps fundamentally products and services, I guess, really, is fundamentally why we're all here. Your organization is providing something. Now, either it's a physical product or it's something you may have. If it's a service, you might be providing literature, that kind of thing, really. And that's a lot of services have moved digital, quite quickly, really. But you need to focus in on the personas, the people, the customers, the clients that are using that product and service, and what do they see, really? What are they paying for, and how will you retain those, and how will you grow and hopefully improve the margins? So there's a couple of quick tools there. I'm just going to go back to. Yeah, so quality functional deployment. Again, this is from Six Sigma, lean thinking, quality management, really, also referred to as the house of quality, really, taking the customer requirements and in a bit more detail breaking down what those things are valued and how they are. So you could take either a service or a product and some of the key attributes of that and make sure that it's scored in some way against customers. And again, back to the relationship and the link with some of those key customers and partners. Business model canvas, probably familiar to some of you. Breaking down that your organization and your products on what you offer, and you can move things around here. Play digital snakes and ladders with this, and move things around so that as you look at some of the other aspects I've mentioned, some of the personas, some of the customers, and say, well, if I was to change this product, if I was to be able to add some additional data, often referred to as metadata, to this particular product or service, how would this change? And then validating what you can do. So if you've got low uncertainty and low technical certainty, then maybe it's just enhancements. That's all you need. Or maybe you've got to go to the far end where you've got to really go experimental, and that's when you want to have that lab environment that I mentioned earlier, where you've already got people, individuals using that technology, and all the things in between, which you can see. Okay, so the plan was to do about 45 minutes, so we're probably not far off that, really. People, absolutely, fundamentally, the key thing to this culture, I find is really important. Simply putting names, specific names, not roles, not departments, but actual individual names. Putting those against the things in your digital transformation plan. That's really important. I mentioned data, fundamental. It's at the core of your organization, and pick some data guarding. Again, give some responsibility to that. Have a data quality improvement plan. I guess you'll know some of these things, but make a list of them. What are the things you can fix, really, and don't guess. you've got to use the tools that are out there. I've tried to give you a very high level view of some of the tools that are available. I mean, it's all about putting things down in a structured way. I guess that's it. And I mentioned earlier about the size of business. Some of these tools may not work within your organization for whatever reason, but at least the structure can be used to make sure that you can quantify things. Again, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, really. Yeah, and when was the last time you checked with your vendors to actually see, well, I've got these systems in place, what can they do? Core systems, can they do what I want to do? Can I make some changes to these things? Can I extract some data using other more modern tools today to analyze that, to give me some insight? Iteration, moving smartly, quickly, and with agility, and pick those cases where they're a good representation, and you can put a spotlight on a few cases to make the changes first, and then get that feedback. Look for partners that are, there are plenty of friendly partners out there, either suppliers or customers, that can work with you to improve the processes between you, the organization, and ultimately improve the margin. And set and use your budget. That's what budgeting's for. So if you've got money, plan to spend it, but spend it wisely, and spend it in small incremental amounts, and you can move things forward. So that's kind of it. Aside from the fact, back to the original thing we started with, fundamentally, if you can organize yourselves, your business, your customers, your clients together, and you can decide how people, process, technology can integrate with your data sets, then you can scale, you can automate and innovate, and you can truly start to reap the benefits, increase the profitability and the margin in your organization by your digitally enabled transformation. So that's it for me for this morning. Happy to take some questions and answers. Well, questions anyway. I might have some answers for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Charlie. That was so insightful and definitely useful to businesses. We've just got a few questions. So firstly, in terms of GDPR, how can we ensure our suppliers are GDPR compliant when we use their systems? Is there an ISO standard to look out for?
Yeah, so the GDPR requires that you should have some written documents in place, so a data processing agreement, and so that's the first place to go to with your suppliers. Will they offer you a data processing agreement in place? There isn't any ISO standard that guarantees GDPR compliance, no. But there is ISO 27001, which is a good indication of a business's attitude to information security. So that's the one to look for, but it doesn't guarantee. There's no seal to guarantee GDPR compliance. So, yeah.
Okay. And we've just got a next question. In your opinion, who should own digital transformation? Where should the book stop and at what level?
Well, back to the RACI matrix, really. If you've got to put the senior management team truly accountable for this. Okay, otherwise it's not going to, because it affects all the aspects that I've talked about. So it's not going to be helpful to give it to a manager who is doing a 9 to 5 as being accountable. They could be responsible for implementing some of this and obviously the feedback, but the accountability needs to rest with the senior team. Yeah.
Thank you. And last question we have: how can you bring the whole company alongside change? Iteration is fine in principle, but if you are changing booking platforms, not all nuances may be covered and customers let down.
Yeah, so this is the real brass tacks, as it were, making changes in a live system. Well, the key thing here then is, can you, in your booking system, Justin, can you perhaps have a different process where you can route particular customers down a different workflow? I don't know the system. So that's the place to start with the pioneer groups. So you're not trying to change everything in big bang if you can. Sometimes it's unavoidable. I accept. I don't know the system, but invariably you can make changes inside the existing system based on configuration and changes, and but make people aware of that. So select pioneers, talk about them, advertise them, and make sure that the team that works with them know that this particular client, this particular process is changing for a period of time. And then, of course, you need that feedback. So I think it is possible to do, but I don't know your system. But we can talk further on that if that's of value.
Thank you very much for that, Charlie. And thank you, Justin, for those questions. They were great. So if I could, I'll just pass you over to my colleagues, Becky and Pam now, that will just give a little bit of an overview about the Growth Hub, and also Pam, who manages South Staffs. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Good morning to the rest of our attendees, and thank you for Charlie for that overview of digital transformation. It is quite a complex subject, so hoping everybody stayed focused. My role under the Growth Hub, I'm a Growth Hub advisor, and my patch is South Staffordshire. So if you need any Growth Hub support, we've got 120 partners with all free funded support schemes that they hold, so we can signpost and help you. Okay, I'm going to pass you over to Becky, my other colleague, to just go into a little bit more depth. Thank you, Becky.
Thanks, Pam, and thank you, Charlie. That was a very comprehensive insight. So just to reiterate what Pam said, really, and make a brief introduction to the Growth Hub for any of the participants that don't already know. As Pam mentioned, we partner with over 120 partner organisations in Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. 18 of those, roughly, are sort of funding and finance. So if you're interested in understanding any potential grant funding schemes that you can tap into, then please come back to myself, Pam Wallace, or Melissa, and we can sort of go through eligibility and advise you on any potential grant funding schemes. Out of the other partners, just to give you an example, so if you're looking for some fully funded mentoring in the business, so any sort of coaching and support, any marketing, it may be that we can place an intern or graduate into the business, fully funded and free of charge, then again, please just come back to one of us as advisors. We offer a confidential one-to-one business diagnostic, so we can either meet in this sort of virtual world over a Zoom, over the telephone, or for a coffee, sit down, understand a little bit more about your business, and marry in some of that funded business support. So feel free to book a diagnostic with one of us as advisors. We've also got a team of specialists. My colleague Matt Huswit, he's the funding and finance specialist advisor for Staffordshire. So his bread and butter is sort of tell you about the grant funding schemes and alternative finance, whether it be equity, debt finance, and those kinds of things. My colleague Joe Gill, he's the HR specialist advisor. So if you still have any questions over the COVID schemes, such as the self-employment or job retention scheme, then I can link you in with Joseph Gill. My colleague Fiona Miller, she's a Growth Hub marketing specialist advisor. So if you're looking to diversify the business or looking at your marketing strategy as a whole, then again, we can link you in with Fiona. And finally, we have a newly appointed high growth specialist advisor, Rich Brace. Rich has adopted the new Oxford Innovation Growth Mapper model. So if you're interested in looking at your growth strategy, then we can link you in with Rich as well. I manage the business support helpline for Staffordshire. I popped the number in the Q&A box, or the chat facility, sorry. And if you just have a question, then I would ask you to just make note of that business helpline number. And if it's just an ad hoc question as you go along, then by all means give me a call. My colleague Melissa does a very good job of keeping people in the loop with things like any grants, funding changes, and so on, and she sends out quite a comprehensive weekly newsletter. You can sign up to the newsletter through our website, which is Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Growth Hub, and then sign up to receive our news updates. And then just very briefly to mention the Kickstart scheme. So you may have heard about Growth Hubs being given an allocation of funding over the past couple of weeks. Growth Hubs from central government were allocated 20 million. We've had £872,000 in Staffordshire, and we split that into two pots. So it's kickstarting tourism, and restarting businesses. So if you're in leisure, hospitality or tourism, you could tap into between 1 and 3,000. Or if you are trading 100% business to business, then you can tap into that funding pot as well between 1 and 3,000. But again, engage with myself, Melissa or Pam, or you can call me on the business helpline. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you very much, both of you. And just once again, I would like to thank Charlie for such a great presentation and for joining the Growth Hub and working in partnership with us. As I mentioned at the start, it is a Do Digital webinar series. This was the second in the series and we have a number to come. So if you just take a little look at our events section on the Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Growth Hub website, you'll be able to find all the Do Digital events on our calendar. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you to all the attendees for joining and taking part in today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.